Do you want to be part of a team that is faith-based and clinically focused? If you're a licensed therapist that lives in any of the 50 states and interested in doing telecounseling, or maybe you're located in Northeast Ohio and you are interested in doing telecounseling or even in-person therapy, Emerge Counseling Ministries might be the right team for you. We have been helping people for over 50 years and want you to be part of our next generation of therapists. Go to emerge.org/careers for more information. We offer very competitive pay along with benefits and a signing bonus. Contact us today to start helping people find rest and live free tomorrow. We can't wait to meet you.
Welcome to the ExEm Podcast. Here's your host, my dad.
Well, we are back, and you are back for another episode of the ExEm Podcast. Thank you for listening as we venture out into the world of faith and mental health and all of these topics that intersect into that lane. We've got a great show for you today. I can't wait for you to meet our guest. She is an accomplished author that took a very dark and difficult life circumstance and turned it into something beautiful. Today on the show, we are going to be discussing grief and one woman's quest to extend her heart to help others through the healing of her own loss and pain. Please welcome to the show, author of I Look to the Morning Sky, Liz Newman.
My name is Liz. I have been married to my husband, Jordan, for 9 years now. We have 2 kids. One is almost 3. He'll be 3 on July 9th, and one is almost 3 months. So
Nice.
that's been a lot of fun.
I'm right there with you. We're about a month behind you.
They're a lot of fun.
They are.
I worked for about 5 years as a physical therapist assistant, and recently I've been able to have the joy of staying home with my 2 boys. I'm also a writer, and my faith has played a big part in my writing. I grew up in a Christian home, and that's a big part of my story as well. So going to church was a part of my story, and hopefully will be part of my boys' story as we're going here and getting them involved in the church, and that's been a big blessing for me as well.
Tell me a little bit about your faith journey. What did that look like?
Yeah, so I started at church, but I had a confirmation. I don't know that all denominations do this, but I got confirmed at like 9th grade, like right before you go into high school, and then I just immediately dropped off.
Oh, really?
Like, so that's like the opposite of what you want to happen when you get confirmed.
There was no confirmation.
Confirmed in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
But I did drop off for a few years there, and I lost my way a little bit with my faith, and I did find my way back after actually a period of I would have called agnosticism. Like I was really confused and was trying to fill that hole with just about anything, but I did find my way back, and since then it's been the biggest blessing of my life to have that in my corner. And especially when you go through parenthood, when you go through loss, when you go through anything major, like I don't know how people do it when they don't have their faith to fall back on. So I'm really glad that I found my way back, but it wasn't exactly a linear journey.
Yeah. I have a similar, growing up in a Christian home, I always had an understanding of faith, but I think for early adulthood, I had to find it on my own. It was always like my parents' thing. And then I always share my story as kind of like the prodigal son. It's like I grew up understanding and knowing, and then I kind of went out and had to realize, oh, wait a minute, I need Jesus, and I think that's a big part of the faith journey is making it your own, and growing up in a Christian home and having a confirmation, and then really trying to find that on your own is an interesting story. I think that's good. Talk to me a little bit about so you and I were connected because of your Emerge journey. Can you talk to me a little bit about Emerge and how that played a part in your life?
Absolutely. So I have been to therapy a few times in my adult life. I started having panic attacks when I was about 19.
Okay.
So I've had anxiety and depression, and I've been to counseling before, and it was great, but Emerge was my first opportunity to experience a faith-based counseling. And that made such a big difference because I felt like it was such a holistic approach to my healing. And I started with my therapist shortly after my dad passed away. And I was struggling, having nightmares and panic attacks, and I just knew that I needed some additional assistance. So I was able to get in with Emerge, and it has been so huge and so helpful to have a therapist walk alongside me in this journey.
So it was anxiety and panic, which is something that I'm very understanding of, and that's really what got me into the mental health world. Talk to me a little bit about the experience you had with loss, because today we want to really talk about the grief journey that you've been on and what you've done to kind of move through that experience. So talk to me a little bit about that.
Okay. So on January 26th of 2021, my dad passed away, and he and I were very, very close. And it's such an interesting story because he battled chronic health issues for my entire growing up. He just, over time, it got worse and worse, and the close calls would get closer and closer. And even in 2018, he got to the point where he was on the ventilator, and we were pretty sure that that was going to be it. And he miraculously pulled through.
Wow.
And I still chuckle to myself because I remember when he was about to be pulled off the ventilator, he was starting to be a little bit more alert, and he asked for a pad to write something on. So I handed him a writing pad, and he wrote Reese's Pieces. So he was always just so resilient, and he kept his humor through every situation. But so we had a close call in 2018, and then he got to be around to meet his first grandson, which was my son, CJ. And in 2021, he had a stroke, and a few days later, he passed from complications from the stroke. But as far as that goes, we couldn't have been more lucky because it is not lost on me how awful the pandemic has been for people and for families. And there are families that didn't get to be with their loved ones in those last moments. And we were lucky he passed in his own bedroom, listening to his favorite music. And my husband and I and our family, we don't live too far away. And so we were able to get there just in time. So I was able to be there in that precious moment, those last breaths. So as painful as that is, it's just such a blessing too, when you're able to be there for that. Sure.
And so, grief is loss. And a lot of times when I'm working with clients, we have to go through a process of, I've shared this before on the podcast, that any loss we experience, we have to grieve. Whether sometimes it's not even a good loss. Sometimes, it might be something in your life that wasn't a healthy thing, but this was something that was really important to you. Your father was really important to you. And then the grief kind of sets in. And talk to me a little bit about that experience.
Yes. So the grief started to settle in, and I had kind of expectations about how I would grieve and when I would grieve. And I think that's a really hard thing about grief for all of us, because we put these expectations and these standards on ourselves. We allow ourselves X number of days or months or weeks to quote unquote get over it, but it's not something that you ever get over. And I think that after a while, when I started really having the panic and just the nightmares, I knew that I needed some additional help. So that's when I got into contact with Emerge and started with my therapist. And she was just so helpful, and not only encouraging me to write, but also just to process all of the big emotions and to feel the things that I needed to feel, because all of it is fair game and no one's going to grieve the same. So I just needed to allow myself to realize that grief is going to look different for everyone, and even different for me from day to day, especially when you're trying to grieve with little people around. Like when you're mom or when you're dad, you need to be able to find those windows of time to grieve, and also to do it in a healthy way around them, so that they might be able to understand what you're experiencing in a reasonable way as well. Yeah.
So, backing up a little bit, prior to all of that, you've had a passion for writing. And so this experience with grief and then a passion for writing kind of came together. Talk to me a little bit about your journey writing.
Yes. So I started writing in the public space probably since about 2016, and I'm a poet and a blogger and a writer, and my work has shown up on a lot of different online publications, and the grief aspect of things became part of my writing and became like the primary focus of my writing after losing my dad. And it's just been such a healthy way for me to process. And I had a friend after I lost my dad that told me that she thought that writing would be a big part of my grieving journey and that I would write through it. And she couldn't have been more right. It's absolutely been a huge healing thing for me.
Yeah. So how did this book get started? Like, I'm sure it's like you lose your dad. It's not like the next day you wake up and like, you know what I'm going to do? So how did that all come together?
Yeah, this was not a book that I planned by any means. And it's just it almost fell together. It very much feels like a God thing. All of it feels very much like a God thing. A little side story. One of the days that I was really struggling, I just remember I was in my bedroom and it was just a dark night of the soul kind of situation. And something just told me, I had this old Bible that I took with me pretty much every time my husband and I moved. He was in the military, so we had moved a lot.
Oh, okay.
And this Bible would always sit by my bedside. And I remember that I had it for a while, but it wasn't the one that I was using. So something told me, open that Bible. So I did. And on the very first page, my dad used to transcribe stuff when he would give it to me. So this Bible was from him from like 2003. And he had just written me this beautiful note on the inside cover. And the very bottom of it said, I hope that this helps you on your journey. And something clicked in that moment, and I just felt him with me. I felt him leading me to the word, and I just also felt him leading me through the writing process and through the grieving process. And it's a really weird thing to say when you think about it, because it's like he was helping me process losing him. Like,
wow.
He was part of the process from that day on in a really major way. And from then on, I was writing the poems in the notes section of my phone. And after a while, I was just like, you know what? I think that this could be really helpful for someone. I think this could be really healing. And the way that I wrote the book, I wanted to be clear that some of the poems were written from more acute grief, and some of them were written from a place that allowed more processing and more time, because there are going to be poems that might be painful for someone to read if they're fresh in grief, and it might also be helpful because they'll see that they're not alone in feeling that way. But I also wanted to include the poems from being further along so that they knew that there is light and there's someone that's ventured out a little bit further and can come back and kind of grab your hand and say, it's going to be okay, come this way, like we'll get through this together.
Yeah. So at what point were you writing that you realized, okay, this is actually going to be a book? Like, did you start with that intent in mind, or was it like all of a sudden you realized, I've just put a collection of these poems together and it may be something?
Yeah, it was about at the year mark, actually. I was like, wow, I have quite a few notes in my notes section of my phone.
Yeah, right.
So I started actually putting them together into a document, and I saw that there was a good amount there. And so I started grouping them together. And it was easy because since they were written on my phone, the dates kind of were already time stamped onto them. So I could basically go in order. It's kind of a grief chronicle for me of that first year.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to me a little bit about that process then, because working with clients that come in with loss, I really encourage them to find an outlet, whether that's journaling, whether that's an activity, but something that gives them movement. And talk to me a little bit about your process with how that was healing in some ways with writing.
I think one of the reasons that writing has always been such a go-to for me, and can be for so many people, is that it just gives you a safe space. Like there's going to be no judgment from that blank page.
Yeah.
You can write exactly what you're feeling, even if it's big and even if it's confusing, and it doesn't have to be polished. It doesn't have to be beautiful. It certainly wasn't beautiful for a lot of my early ones. Like, these aren't all first draft poems.
Yeah.
But I think it helps to name it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like once you bring it into the light, so to speak, you can deal with it a little bit easier. You can see where you're at. And even sometimes that page is the first space that you pour out that pain, or the first one that you confide in. And I'm such an advocate for mental health therapy and for prayer and for community. And sometimes that's just such a helpful tool to have in your toolbox, to be able to write, to be able to journal. And that's also why at the end of the collection, I have writing prompts as well. So for anyone,
really? That's awesome.
Yeah, I have 12 writing prompts included in the back. And my hope was it's not just for aspiring writers. It's just for anybody.
Yeah.
I just wanted to invite people to have a safe space to start getting out some of those emotions and start really making sense of the losses that they've experienced. And it could be a brand new, fresh wound or grief, or it could be something that you've been thinking about or holding on to in your heart for years.
Yeah.
It honestly is just something that I wanted a chance for people to experience the healing that I experienced through writing. And actually, one of the prompts was an idea that my therapist gave me. She had the idea that I should write a letter to my dad, because there's so many things that you want to tell your person when they leave you. And I always talk to him anyway, here and there, but to be able to, there's something really powerful about the medium of writing and putting things down physically, tangibly, pen to paper. And it was actually something really special. And I brought it up to my family, and we all wrote him a letter on his first birthday after his passing. I don't think we'll do it every year. It was very emotional.
Sure.
But, this year it was right for us, and maybe it'll be right for you at one point if someone wants to write that for their person as well. And I think that's the beauty of it. It could be whatever you need it to be. And it's just a safe space to start making sense of really big emotions and experiences.
Yeah. I think the therapeutic aspect of it is like you have all of these emotions and thoughts swimming around in your head. And I think there's something to formulating those and putting them on paper. And it's almost like an instant release that I think is so important, and it's also artistic. And I think that's the other thing, I think God is a God of art. He created everything. And for us to be able to, I've shared on the podcast before, I was a touring musician for 15 years. So I've written hundreds and hundreds of songs. That was so therapeutic for me because so many things that I was going through in life allowed me to process when I was actually able to get those thoughts out of my head. Because when they're just swimming in your head, it's hard to be able to move through whatever the experience is. And I think it's really encouraging what you've done. I love the idea of the prompts. I mean, what a gift to a reader to be able to experience your words, and then you're giving them the opportunity to take that on. Would you be okay with maybe sharing one of your poems with us and sharing a little bit about it?
Absolutely. So one I would love to share is one called I'm Bringing You With Me. And it's just basically a poem that I wrote in honor of my dad and the way that I was going to bring him into my everyday, the things that I was going to focus on, making sure that my kids knew about him, and just the way that I was going to carry his love and his legacy forward. I'm bringing you with me. The grief is so heavy when the pain is so fresh, when each breath hurts and each day is a reminder of what's been lost, what's been broken with this new reality. But I wanted to tell you, I'm not doing this without you. I'm bringing you with me. Your love will live on through memories, through your family, through your children, through me. Every chance that I get, I'll tell your grandchildren a story about your quirks, your kindness, your unending love and consistency. I'll play your favorite songs so they become a soundtrack of our home, a part of their childhood and yours, a tradition of melodies. I'll keep your pictures up, snapshots in time that capture your smile and the wisdom in your eyes, something they too will always get to see. I'll cook your favorite foods until the smells naturally weave together with the sound of your name and the sound of laughter and family. I'll show them your favorite books and share your favorite bands. I'll show them the art you carried in your heart that you are always so willing to share with me. but perhaps most importantly will be the things that can't be physically seen, as I do my best to illustrate your compassion and wit, your courage and resiliency. And every chance I get, like you did for me, I'll make the most of my moments, my opportunities, to tell them how much they mean to me, to say, I love you immensely.
That's beautiful.
Thank you.
How do you feel when you read those words?
It's hard not to get emotional, just because something that I love about poetry and also about therapy, honestly, is the focus on the imagery and putting yourself back into an experience and into an emotion. And reading that, he and I used to spend a lot of time out on his back patio. He was pretty homebound. He was paraplegic, but we would sit out on his back patio and talk about life. And reading that, it allows me to revisit that and also just think of ways that I can bring him forward with me and teach my kids about him. And it's just a special thing to be able to carry those moments that sometimes are painful, like when you're very fresh in the grief, but sometimes they're the most comforting thing that you have are your moments and your memories. And to think of the ways that I can bring his characteristics into my adult life too, and his humor and his one-liners and all the things that I loved so much about him. I heard a quote a long time ago. It was something along the lines of, be the things you love most and you miss most about the people that are gone. So just we get this opportunity as the people that our loved ones leave behind on the side of eternity to share their love with the world, share their humor and their resiliency. So I've made it my mission to bring those parts of him forward with me.
Yeah. I love the fact that you're leaning into it and you're allowing yourself to experience it, and you're allowing yourself to have permission to be all the emotions. And I have found a lot of people, and I don't know if this is something that's just kind of innate inside the human brain, want to avoid all of that. We just want to avoid, not feel, not experience, but that's not healthy. It's not helpful. And you have really embraced that, and being able to, I think the idea of somebody losing somebody so close to them and then diving in and writing things like that you've been writing would scare most people, because that means now I've got to face it. I've got to think about things that are hard. I've got to allow myself to emote, which most people, a lot of people don't. It's a very, very, very powerful process. The book's called I Look to the Morning Sky. If somebody's listening right now and they're like, you know what, I need that, where do they find it?
Yes, it is for sale on Amazon, and there's paperback, and then there's also Kindle editions.
Nice. So would you be okay maybe sharing another one? Would that be okay?
Absolutely.
Great.
So the other one I would love to share is just one that I wrote with other grievers in mind, because something that I have noticed, and I think it's something that you learn once you're the one grieving. Like some lessons you only learn when you're in that tough space. And I think that when you're grieving, it's very easy to feel overlooked. It's very easy to feel like you're not seen in this space and that no one understands. And it's a lonely place to be, especially as in those first couple weeks, you have a lot of support, and then life goes on, and sometimes you just feel stuck. And I just wanted to write a poem that hopefully will help people see that they're not alone in that space. And so this one's called They'll See You. As the weeks turn into months and the world continues to turn, you may feel hopelessly stuck in the spot where grief greeted you. Others move forward, the world moves forward, but you feel motionless, hopeless, directionless because of what you've gone through. And I know you feel lonely here. I know you feel so alone. I've been there too. But one day when you're ready, you'll take a step forward too. But on the days when you're not, other hurting hearts can come and meet you. There are others who will wait with you, who will hurt with you. There are others who can say, I've been there too, and they'll see you. They'll see you.
It's good.
Oh, thank you.
If somebody's listening right now, and I'm sure there are, I just was looking yesterday. We are currently now in 51 countries. So
Wow.
I have no idea who's going to be listening to this. But if somebody's grieving right now, what do you think would be good for them to know?
Yes. So to anyone that is listening, that is grieving, firstly, I just want to say that I'm so deeply sorry from the bottom of my heart. And the pain that you'll carry now, I know it will feel unbearable at times, but I just want to give you permission to feel the things that you need to feel. And I want to encourage you that getting help is one of the most courageous things that you can do. And grief is hard, and heart work is hard. Going through all the emotions and processing all the things that you need to feel can be unbearably hard. But there are people that can help you, therapists, there are friends, there is community, and just don't hide in that darkness. I know you might need to be there, but just let yourself feel the things, but also let yourself get help when you need it. And just know that even when you feel alone in that darkness, you're not alone. And there are people that want to help you. And it's okay to feel the things you need to feel. There's no timeline to this process. Grieving is not linear. You might have a great day, and then you might have an awful day. And I think it's important, too, that people know that the great days are nothing to feel guilty for. Sometimes when people are grieving, they feel like they shouldn't ever be happy again.
So true.
And I think one of the biggest things I'm learning in this process is living in the tension of the love and the loss and the grief and the gratitude. And as Christians, I think that's the best thing that we have, is that we can grieve with hope, and that there's a time and a place for everything, and we can weep, and we can appreciate the people that sit with us when we need to weep.
Yeah.
But we also grieve with hope, and we know that we'll get to see our loved ones again someday, and that's a comforting thought. And when you just need to be in a space where you're feeling all the things, all the hard things, all the happy things, I just really encourage you to let yourself feel those things, and to be patient with yourself as you do, and to give yourself the time that you need to heal and to keep moving forward, and to know that grief may be something that you'll live with forever, because you'll miss that person forever.
Yeah.
But you don't have to carry it alone. And it's a journey that you can go on with others, especially other believers. It helps to have other believers. And the last thing I would say, when you are in a dark night of the soul, it is okay to be honest with God when you're upset. It is okay to be honest with God in your prayers. There was a time when I first lost my dad that the only thing I could pray was, God, hold on to me here. And for days, that's all I would pray.
Wow.
And I know that he listened, and I know that he was there. And even if all you can muster is help or I need you, he's there, and he's not going to leave you there in that darkness, and he can handle every emotion that you have. So just hang on. And if you don't have the faith during that time, you can have a friend come alongside you, or a therapist that will hold that space for you and fill in the gaps and hold on to that faith for you until you're ready again. But just know that your prayers are still heard, even when they're barely above a whisper.
That's good. It's powerful. The book's called I Look to the Morning Sky, and it's not mourning, it's Mourning.
Yes.
Which I think is important as people listen to this. If you're looking for it on Amazon, it's Mourning, which is a really beautiful play on words, and a very clever title to this. And Liz, thank you so much for being a part and sharing this and sharing your story, and for what you're doing. I just think what a powerful way to take a very difficult experience, but also be able to extend just a light to people who might be not able to find their way out of grief. And this is such a great resource, I think, for people who are experiencing grief, and maybe even people who aren't, who just would really kind of get something out of your writing. I think it's a great opportunity for people. So thank you so much for being here, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you, Liz, for such a wonderful inspiration way to navigate the grieving process. Friends, please go to Amazon and order Liz's book. I look to the morning sky. I put the link in the liner notes of this episode. And go follow her on Facebook at /Liz Newman Writer. Loss is something that we cannot avoid. It's universal to the human experience. To quote a Flaming Lips song that I enjoyed back in the day called Do You Realize? He says, everyone you know someday will die. And just as the sun comes out tomorrow, it's inevitable. But we don't talk about loss, and most people don't know how to properly grieve. It's a very, very difficult thing, and I don't know that each person needs to do it the same way, and that we have license to grieve in the way that we need to, but it needs to be addressed. It can't be avoided. And so hopefully this episode was helpful for you in maybe learning and hearing a little bit more about the grief process. Well, until next time, or when our Savior comes, God bless.